Happy Friday. So, yes, we've had the child poverty plan revealed. Before I go over that, there's a little comment there saying, should more Labour MPs use biscuits to explain government policy, debt, etc.? It's gone viral. Yes, so this is referring to a Labour MP, Scott from Glasgow, who did some videos on Twitter. And one of them at least has got several million views using biscuits. They should absolutely do things like this. It's quite funny because I am working on something for the Brexit referendum anniversary next year. So working on various Brexit videos to explain the issues. And one of the things I said straight away was we visual, if we're going to do something properly about it, not just one of my usual videos, you need some visual explanation. So I'd explained, for example, that if you have this is what I plan to use. If you've got two tennis balls to represent the amount by which taxes went up in the budget last week, in terms of that report that just came out explaining how much money the Treasury is losing just because of Brexit, nothing else, just Brexit. If we hadn't left the EU, never mind that two tennis balls, we'd have had another 36 tennis balls worth of taxes. So Rachel Reeves wouldn't have had to raise those taxes. And that's just the amount of money the Treasury lost. But these visual representations are really, really important. I think, and again, this comes back to my teaching days, I suppose. If you're going to explain something complicated to people, you need to do a couple of things. First of all, you want visual representations because, of course, we know some people are visual learners, right? So for visual learners, you want visual representation. And there's a lot of visual learners. It's a significant chunk of the population. And also, if you do visual learning, it works for non-visual learners as well. And the second thing you need to do is to bring it down to terms that people can understand, that connects it to their personal lives, right? So yeah, Labour MPs should 100% do more stuff like that. But anyway, let us get on to this. So Labour have announced their review. Now, tackling child poverty, you can see on the front cover here, I've put a link to this document in the description below if you wish to peruse it at your leisure, because obviously we'll not have time to go through it all or anywhere near it all. As you can see there, got some nice pictures on the front, got a newborn baby, a couple of kids playing in a park. They look reasonably happy. A couple of older kids, teenagers, who look for some reason delighted to be going shopping. Something that many people consider a chore, apparently is a great laugh. Disabled kid, and then some kids running towards a school. That looks a bit contrived if you ask me. I've seen kids running away from a school. I have to say, as a teacher of 20 years experience, I've never seen kids en masse running towards a school. Is there someone with a shotgun behind them? We don't really get that in this country, so I very much doubt it. But anyway, before we go into some of the contents of this, we should be clear about what exactly is poverty, because there are two definitions of poverty. There's relative poverty, and there is what is called in this country and in this document, deep material poverty. So relative poverty is simply, is your household income, so it's based on household income, is your household income, when you've taken into account taxes and housing costs, less than 60% of the median average? If it is, you are in relative poverty. But relative poverty, you may still be all right. There's even if we did actually have a properly functioning economy and everyone was grand, there would still be such a thing as relative poverty. So that still matters, by the way. But what matters most is the sort of biting poverty, what's called the deep material poverty. And that is based on 13 criteria, which I'll just rattle through really quickly. If you meet any four of these criteria, you are classed as being in deep material poverty. And this is on the government website. So it says, without cutting back on essentials, are you able to pay regular bills like rent, mortgage, electricity or council tax if GB, or rates if Northern Ireland? If you struggle, that's one marker. Next one. Are you able to put money aside to cover unexpected expenses? So at the end of the month, is there some money you can put into a pot for emergencies, like the boiler breaking down, the car breaking down, something like that? If the answer is no, then again, that's another marker. Could you cover the cost of replacing or repairing appliances such as a washing machine, fridge or cooker if they broke? Is your home kept in a good state of decoration and repair? Right? In other words, if the wallpaper's peeling, because it's been up there since the 1970s, and if the reason you're not changing it is because of money, I mean, you might just not change it because you're just lazy, right? Or you just don't want to, whatever. It's your house, do what you like. But if the reason why the wallpaper is peeling and you're not addressing it is because of not enough money, then that would be another marker. In cold weather, is your home kept adequately warm? Is your home damp free? I mean, everyone gets damp from time to time, but can you deal with it? Or it just is an ever-present problem that you cannot deal with? And again, because of cost. Does everyone in your household have access to transport that is reliable, timely, safe and affordable? I mean, in some parts of the country, that's going to be no straight away, even if you're well off. Are the heating, electrics, plumbing and drains in good working order? And then specifically for children, the markers are, do the children that you have a suitable place at home to do their homework? Do the children eat 3 meals a day? Do the children eat fresh fruit and or vegetables every day? Do the children have enough clothes that they feel comfortable to wear? And finally, do the children have enough toys, games and outdoor equipment suitable for their age? So those are the, what is officially classed as deep material poverty. What you mentioned, John mentioned there, absolute poverty. I think absolute poverty can have a slightly different definition, but this is the one that the government go by. So that's the definition there. So let's have a look. Now, if we just look in here, I'm not going to read the forward or anything. We could look at the executive summary because there's something. I was having a quick flick through it earlier. I've only had time to read through so much of it, by the way, because it's only just come out. So in terms of the executive summary, it lays out the reasons for it. Remember, we are living in a time where the media are very much attacking people on benefits again. It cycles round, doesn't it? It was like attacking immigrants, attacking trans people, back to attacking... It was always many years ago, by the way, attacking people on benefits. We had like Benefit Street and stuff like that, pushing various narratives in the mainstream media. Then it was about immigrants, then it's trans people. And now then we're back to immigrants in the summer, and now we're back to people on benefits around budget. I mean, that's how it is, isn't it? It's like during the summer, when you've got peak boat crossing season, we're going to attack immigrants. Roundabout budget time, we're going to attack people on benefits. And then all of the times we'll attack trans people, right? So they're having to lay the case out for why we need to be helping people who are much less fortunate than most. And the focus on children is, of course, a good one because no one blames children. But there was something in... Where was it now? There was something in here that I thought was odd, where it's... So I'll tell you another thing I quite liked about it, is where it bigs up the last Labour government as well, right? So it says child poverty rates in the UK were comparatively low during the 1960s and 70s. During the 80s, they rose. Wonder why that was, eh? Wonder why that was. And by 1997, of course, the year when Labour took over from that excessively long Conservative period of government, children were more likely to be in poverty than people of working age or pensioners. However, by 2010, 2011, so that's when the Tories took over again, the number of children in poverty had reduced by 600,000 compared to 97, 98. So in other words, they're saying the last Labour government reduced child poverty by 600,000. They don't make clear which poverty number they mean. I will say there, it just says poverty, so it's not saying which form of poverty. I'm sure we could look it up. Then it says, since 2010, a series of structural changes, cuts to public services and social security and a lack of economic growth increased rates of child poverty again to the point where in 2023-24, there were 4.5 million children in relatively low income after housing costs, 900,000 more than in 2010-2011. 2 million children in deep material poverty. So it talks about that. And it says, to drive down the child poverty rates within this parliament, we will take immediate action to remove the 2-child limit, lifting 450,000 children out of relative poverty within this parliament. Around 2 million children will live in households that will see an increase in income as a result of removing the 2-child limit, including 600,000 children in deep material poverty. Removing the limit is the most cost-effective, and this is all true, by the way. The Resolution Foundation and other experts have been clear about this for years. That was the single most cost-effective way to drive down child poverty rates. In modern Britain, the number of brothers and sisters a child has should not determine whether or not they will go hungry tonight. So again, it's very much trying to present a moral imperative here. This investment represents a down payment on Britain's future. Because again, now, so here's another thing that I would certainly want to talk about, because so you push the moral imperative, good. You also do need to push the economic imperative. We need to get more people to realize that it's not just about whether it's going to boost your children. Obviously, anyone affected here, it's not just about the children. Anyone in a household is going to have their life improved as a result of this. Because remember, in some households where you have deep child poverty, the parents themselves sometimes go hungry to make sure the kids go hungry as little as possible, right? So parents skip meals. So with this change, it's not just that kids should have a full belly, but the parents as well, right? But we need to understand the economic benefits. First of all, those children are going to grow up to be the work units of the future. And we need those work units in order to have a larger economy and to pay people's pensions. Where does everyone's pension, it doesn't matter what sort of pension you got, I keep going over this. State pension is paid directly via taxation, therefore it is paid directly by people who are making enough money to pay tax, right? Mostly workers. So it's mostly workers paying for the state pension. But then even indirectly, if you've got a private pension, what pays your private pension? Investments. You've invested. What are you invested in? Work, productivity, for which you need workers. If you've got a works pension, same thing. A works pension and a private pension are investments. The money was invested into a fund, and in retirement, you then get a certain amount of money per month. And if you live to a ripe old age, you do well out of it. If you don't live very long into retirement, you don't do so well out of it. But still, it's being funded by the people being productive at that time. The people, so state pension is paid directly from taxation, and other types of pension are paid for out of current productivity. So it's worker driven. And people need to understand that, and the government should really push that a lot more. You should want your neighbours' children to have government assistance because that helps you. It boosts the economy, which means that you have a better job and your company has more customers, and it will also pay for your retirement. Doesn't matter how rich you think you are, your money is worthless if there's no one driving it. I've lived in relative poverty for most of the nearly 32 years I've been alive. Almost everything I've ever had that can be classed as expensive was given as gifts. I know many others like me too. Well, indeed, by definition, the median average is the halfway point. So 50% of people have less than the median. 60% of the median, I'd have to look it up, but that's still a significant number of people. It's many millions of people that have below 60%. But anyway, it's important to make that point. I do think about the economic side of it. I always say, in my videos, whenever I'm presenting arguments, by the way, and I do make a point of, I don't very often present the moral argument because morality is subjective, but economics has a broader base. So I tend to make practical arguments, which are usually economic arguments. Sometimes it's other things, because it's what can we all agree on? We can't all agree on morality, but we can all agree that everyone wants to be able to retire. And if you want to be able to retire, it doesn't matter how rich you are, your money is coming from people working right now. But anyway, in terms of some ways, so it's talking about how it's doing this. In terms of the headline figures, boosting family incomes. It goes through details of how it's done that. Driving down the cost of essentials. Again, it's like if your income goes up and your expenses go down, then your disposable income increases. Or you may get to a point where you have disposable income if you don't have it at the moment. So that's tackling it at both ends. That's obvious. Strengthening local support is their third pillar here by the looks of it. So in terms of what they said about boosting family incomes, increase the national living wage by 6.7% from April 2025 for the lowest earners, with a further increase to £12.71 per hour from April 2026. Strengthen rights at work through the Employment Rights Bill. It's about time they started talking about that. To tackle insecurity and create more secure jobs across the UK. We're going to need that. Should be doing a video on that tomorrow. Well, not the Employment Rights Bill, but a side issue. Introduce the first sustained above inflation increase to the basic rate of universal credit, estimated to be worth annually in cash terms £725 for a single parent aged 25 or over, or £1,135 for a couple with children by 2029-2030. Implement the fair repayment rate in universal credit from blah, 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 blah. Propose reforms to the child maintenance service in Great Britain, which will live 20,000 children out of relatively low income. Biggest shake-up of job centres in a decade to ensure more people receive personalised support. We will see how that works in practice, but they are certainly funding more support. Expanded government-funded childcare to working families in England. I mean, again, I would say on something like this, you're just going to need to keep doing it. Childcare will always be a barrier to productivity until we have, like we have with schools, until we have state-funded childcare. You just basically need state-funded childcare. It's like as soon as you finish your maternity/paternity leave, is there a local centre which is free, it's paid for by the state, which will look after your child for the hours needed. And it needs to be to cover a lot of different work times. So they need to be open from like 7 in the morning till maybe even 7 at night to allow people to get to work and back again to pick them up, right? So I think, I don't know how much something like that would cost. I'm going to guess far too much to implement it in one fell swoop. And then, of course, you'd need to staff it and all the rest of it. It could take time. But I would suggest that childcare is always going to be a significant barrier to productivity unless we tackle that. So we really need the government to try and work out a way to make sure that if you had those free childcare centres, it would mean more people in work, and the extra taxes raised and the extra productivity should then cover the cost of those childcare facilities. But will it? Or do you have to means test it? Maybe it's free to people below a certain income, and then maybe it's a subsidised rate for people on a middle income, and then you pay full whack for people above a certain income. Do you do something like that to make it more affordable? But I do think you need to really cover that. Are you suggesting expanding states' capacity? How dare you? Yes, I am, 100%. The states, yes, some states run things can be run inefficiently if they're not run well. But the answer to that is, instead of having ministers run them, like a private company, right, has a CEO. It has a board of directors, has CEO. There's no reason not to do that for state-run things. Absolutely no reason. Pay top dollar. Don't care. You pay the chief executive millions of pounds a year in terms of salary and bonuses. I really don't give a shit. What I give a shit about is the profit side of it. That's the problem, because it does two things. First of all, it's a waste of money. It means that the amount of money you're having to spend on these things, whether it be childcare or train ticket or whatever, some of it is just going into profit. It's not going into covering the cost of running the service. It's just profit, right? The second issue I have with it is the CEO is focused on the profit because they are answerable to the shareholders. So the service, be damned, the service will be as bad as they can get away with. And very often, sometimes drops even below that standard. So yeah, I'm certainly talking about an increase in state control. Driving down the cost of essentials, what have they got to say here? £39 billion in a new 10-year social and affordable homes programme in England. Biggest investment in recent memory. Well, any investment's the biggest investment in recent memory, because we've got none from the Conservatives. I still keep challenging people. Name me one thing the Conservatives invested in. What you might have said a few years ago, HS2, but then they cancelled it. So they can't even say that. More subsidised childcare service options will definitely help. They would. You just need to get it to a point where it pays for itself, because it will produce extra productivity, but it will also cost. You know, the cost means you're going to have to tax to cover those costs, and you're going to have to pay out before you get the economic benefits. The economic benefits will take time, because you need to pay to have the centres set up. You need, state-run centres. They could be attached to schools. There's no reason not to attach them to schools, in fact. But nonetheless, they need setting up somewhere, and you need to pay to train all the staff. So it'll probably take a couple of years to actually get them set up to any working level, for which you have to tax people and there's no return. The return would come later. The return would take several years. But you need to make sure that when that return comes, it's worth it. So it's like, yes, we're going to have to pay a bit more tax to get it started. But once it's started, then it's like, you've got childcare. Childcare is not a barrier to you working. If you don't have enough money to pay for childcare, it's free for you. If you have money but you don't have enough to pay the normal rates, then it's subsidised for you, so that you pay a contribution, but it's subsidised. And a sliding scale rather than cliff edges, I would suggest. But a chunk of people who get it for free, a chunk of people who pay some contribution according to their household income, and a chunk of people it's like, yeah, you are actually rich enough to pay for it yourself. Hello from Clacton again. Is it sunny in Clacton? It's not very sunny here, I have to say, which is normal. Anyway, what else have they said? Expanded free school meals. That is certainly true. It's not just about the breakfast clubs. They have actually increased the number of people who are eligible for free school meals, which is a good thing. Quite funny, isn't it? I still get some of the old Corbynites trying to call Keir Starmer kid starve, and it's like, mate, he's like covered breakfast and expanded the number of people on free school meals. Catch up. Committed £600 million investment into the holiday activity and food programme. Things like this, like money like that, you always need to break it down, don't you? 600 million. Is that a lot? Don't know. How much is that per kid? Depends how many kids. To deliver enriching activities and healthy food for the poorest children throughout the holidays. Well, how many children is that? That's what I would like to know. Introduced a limit of free branded school uniform items to cut costs for parents. That's always useful. Because school uniforms are a pain in the ass, aren't they? Extended the Warm Homes discount to an additional 2.7 million households in Great Britain. And then strengthening local support, announced the Pride in Place programme, which will deliver up to £5 billion funded to 244. So we can do that one, can't we? Let's have a look at that. Hang on. Let me just get my phone out for the old calculator. I hate phones. Come here. Where's my bloody calculator? Oh, bugger. So that is about £20 million per place. So £5 billion funding to 244 of the most in-need places in Britain, Great Britain, like deprived places. That is £20 million. Although I will note that has actually caused a little bit of a stink in Wales, at least. I don't know about Scotland. I would imagine so for the same reason. So I know Labour in Wales are not actually impressed with that because, of course, they will have some of those deprived areas. They feel, and I would back them on this, by the way, they feel that they should be allocating that money. So when you notice there, it's a £5 billion funding programme to deprived areas of Great Britain. So that means Scotland and Wales as well, where these sort of things are usually devolved. Usually these sort of things say England. And then due to the Barnett consequentials, the Scottish and Welsh parliaments get a proportionate amount of funding to decide how to use themselves, right? So I think Welsh Labour are not happy that this is being allocated directly from Westminster. And I would argue they probably have a point. I would suggest they have a point. Overhauled English local government funding through the first blah, blah, blah. This is all boring stuff, isn't it? I think one of the more interesting bits was, where was it now? So they're first of all promising to make sure that we do not have children living in B&Bs for more than 6 weeks by the next election. Because at the moment, it's already the law that children in temporary accommodation, and it's something I could be, but it's supposed to be temporary accommodation. It's not really it's not a suitable environment for a child. It's not great for an adult, but it's not really suitable for a child for long term. So it's already the law that it's not supposed to be a permanent thing. It's supposed to be temporary. But all too often it ends up being very, very long term, shall we say. So there's a sort of promise, I think, from Labour that they're going to make sure that that is not the case. It says £8 million pilot injection to stop families from having to live in B&Bs for more than 6 weeks. And I think that is supposed to be something that they're going to say. I've not heard anything bad from this review, to be honest. I mean, there will be more stuff to come. I mean, I will do a more detailed video on it probably for Sunday now, because I need to go through it and I need to read what various people have said about it. It has only just come out. We have been waiting a long time for it. I mean, the thing I would say as well is how many children does it think it's going to pull out of poverty with it? Because I think they're saying 550,000, which is a lot, don't get me wrong, but 450,000 of those are going to be pulled out by just removing the 2-child cap. So if you think about the 2-child cap and the circumstances that led to that being removed, if that's going to pull about maybe 450,000 kids out of poverty, then that means that this plan itself is just going to do it for 100,000, which, and I don't want to downplay the 100,000 either. That's still a significant number of children. But then you think to yourself, so what if they hadn't stopped the child, if they hadn't got rid of the 2-child cap? What if they hadn't done that? Was this just going to be a poverty review that would say, that would have all of this stuff, pages and pages of stuff that's going to lift 100,000 kids out of poverty? Because that would have been ridiculous, by the way, because then people would have said, you could lift 450,000 people out of poverty, children out of poverty, just by removing the 2-child cap. So it is just as well they've done that, because I would suggest their child poverty, this strategic review would look, I think it would have had a lot of criticism if they'd not done that. If they'd not actually got rid of the 2-child cap, I think they would have looked utterly ridiculous. But they have, so it's fine, it's grand. Randy Pagan, they say, I remember having to stay in B&Bs with my mum when I was 7 to 8, roughly 2-3 weeks at a time, till my mum got a house. Yeah, these days it's a lot worse. I mean, as they say in the thing, poverty has gotten significantly worse. I mean, people are noticing. We know it globally, like, well, across the West anyway, because the cost of living is becoming the #1 issue across lots of countries, including the UK. The reason why Labour, I mean, we can point to all sorts of failings on Labour's part on communications and other things as to why they've absolutely crashed in the polls since they won the election last year. But the single, if we were to point to one specific issue, it is this, that people don't feel that the cost of living crisis has been dealt with. It's really that simple. It's all down to that. If people felt, doesn't matter how many missteps Labour made, doesn't matter how bad their communications, if people felt that things were going in the right direction, Labour would be riding high in the polls. You know, the cost of living is just like the issue for so many people. It always used to be the economy, or sometimes it would flip between the economy and the NHS, depending on which people thought was most in peril. But when we said the economy was a top concern for voters, we meant literally that. Just in general, how's the economy? People always recognise that that's important. But now it's specifically economy as it relates to individuals, the cost of living. Affordability, as they're calling it in America. Although I've noticed that word sneaking into this report as well. I wonder if Labour are mimicking the Democrats' term, or if it's just a coincidence. Tom, they're saying, nice day this on screen, making my house on Warcraft. Don't want to be an adult today. I started mine yesterday. I'll carry on with it at the weekend. Our school's also fortunate enough to have a fund for providing kids from families in need with meal vouchers during holiday in between term times. Heard that help. That will help a lot. I remember in 2020, when due to the rigours of COVID, the government were forced to do that themselves across the country. Boris Johnson tried, not even Tory MPs were going, this isn't a good look, mate. Boris Johnson tried to argue for not feeding these kids over that summer, and eventually had to U-turn on it. And from Boris Johnson's point of view, he probably just thought to himself, well, we don't pay for them in normal summers. What's the difference this summer? What's the difference? And the difference was there was more of a focus on it, that people were more mindful of those going without, because all of a sudden the idea of going without was hitting a lot of people's minds with like worries about job security and so on, which is why, of course, the furlough program was required. So that's the difference. Whereas you go, 5 years later, what's changed? What's changed is a lot of those people who were suddenly more mindful of the cost of living, and showing a bit of empathy towards others who were doing without, has gone, because they're all right again. They are no longer fearing for themselves, although maybe they should. And all of a sudden now they're concerned about taxes again, and back to attacking people on benefits. So that's the difference. So that's why this is also important in that, although, I think many of us would like Labour to take a much stronger stance against the flow of right-wing propaganda on things like immigration and trans rights. But this is a case of them very much going against that sort of far-right narrative, because they are making, in a lot of cases, they are making the moral case. I think they could do more to make more of an economic case, but they are making the moral case for tackling with this. Labour will have to deal with wealth inequality as well if they really want to tackle poverty, yes. But again, to me, the first serious step on that is land tax. You can't do anything to, like, where is that wealth effectively going? It's draining into American corporations. You can't do anything about that with Trump in charge. You would probably struggle, if I'm honest, with any American president, because every head of government is supposed to look out for their own country's interests. Now, with Trump, it's a bit different. He's not looking out for his own country's interests, but his interests are still aligned with those corporations because they funded him, right? So it amounts to the same thing from that point of view. So we've got no chance there. The only thing we can realistically do I say the only thing, okay, there might be some other things that just no one else is bringing to my attention, but land tax is the best. That's the first best step. Reform property tax, but you have to be careful with that to not spook the horses. But land tax, start with land. I keep saying start with land. You do it incrementally. You don't have to come up with one all bells and whistles land tax. Start with land that's not productive. Stop land banking. And that's how you make your argument. It prevents land banking. Say growing wealth inequality is a massive driver of child poverty or poverty in general. Yes. And we're going to get another one, which again is related to a video I'm going to do tomorrow on the threat of AI. That, in some countries, we'll hope not ours, but in some countries, could easily boost poverty. And any increase in poverty inevitably boosts child poverty. Because in terms of, like, in society, who are the people most likely to struggle with the cost of living? People with children, right? Pensioners traditionally, like, low-income pensioners can as well, of course. There are many poor pensioners. But that's just a case of, can they sustain themselves? Often poverty, people can enter retirement in poverty, of course. And some people find themselves in poverty when their partner dies, right? When they're widowed, for example. Because there's a sudden change in financial circumstance, sudden drop in the income. But there isn't there isn't a massive drop in costs. You know, okay, you're not buying as much food. Beyond that, your costs are largely the same. So but nonetheless, people who are most likely to struggle with the cost of living are people with children. Case in point, I'll leave this as my final point because we've sort of run out of time. Case in point, I might have mentioned this earlier this week. There was a fella, it's in the BBC. The BBC did actually promote this. They wrote a story on this about the 2-child limit. So there's this guy, right? And he's a decorator and painter. So he's working, everything's fine. He and his partner have 5 kids, right? Okay. Then his partner dies. She just died. So all of a sudden he is the not just primary caregiver to those children, the only caregiver, can't work. Because there's some of these children, they're all young. One of them's like a baby still, really, an infant. And, you know, and the others are not. You saw a photo of him with them. They're not old. They're not old kids, right? So he can't work, but he's now in poverty because he can't work, but because of the 2-child cap, he's got 5 kids. That's a lot of mouths to feed, but on an income that is judged to be enough for him and 2 children, because that's how it's worked out. He's given just enough to manage, and even then it's not really enough to manage, if we're honest, isn't it? But he's given, in theory, just enough for him and 2 children to manage, but he's got an extra 3 children. So for him, this, he said, will help. Of course it will. And in a situation like that, what are you supposed to do? What was he supposed to do? Well, don't have kids if you can't afford them. He could afford them. His partner died. What we're going to say, don't have kids if you think your partner might die. Well, that means don't have kids then. Elon Musk is on Twitter again today saying he's posting birth rates in lots of advanced economies, including the UK. He's going, people need to have more kids. Will you make your mind up? Are we supposed to not have kids because we might not be able to afford them? Don't have kids unless you're a millionaire? Or do we need to have more kids? Which is it? Which is it? Make your mind up. The right would have said they should have insured the mother to the gunnels. Well, possibly. But those are the people who are going to drop any sort of change in circumstances. I had students, for example, when I taught in FE college many years ago, you had adults as learners as well as like teenagers. And every now and then, you know, you would come across a situation of one of my students who they or their partner lost their job. All of a sudden, you know, even if the other one's working, that your household income has been slashed and you've got kids. You know, that's the real problem. You know, it's one thing for a couple to cut back if one of them loses their job. That might be doable. But when you've got kids, that's much harder. But anyway, there it is. We'll leave it there. Again, I'll have a good go through it and I'll hopefully come up with something for Sunday on what I think are some of the highlights and like areas of concern, if there are any. Have a great rest of day. It should be on Graham's stream, I think, in 20 minutes. And until next time, I'll see you later.